He created them, male and female. He created them. We're having an interesting conversation in our country, okay? And that is define what is a man or what is a woman. Okay? And the issue here, are there some complexities out there? Yes, there are. For example, right as I was leaving the State Department, I was talking to some of the other science fellows there, godly people, doing a lot of excellent research, and they found out the factor that we now have data showing that a lot of the chemicals that are used to manufacture a lot of stuff that we have, okay, has negative impacts. For example, it has been correlated with reduced sperm counts in populations around here. It's also been correlated that it also impacts developing fetuses. So it can have impacts on people, and for lack of a better phrase, whether they tend to be androgynous or not. Okay? So we're having issues out there that we have to take into account as Christians in terms of what might be beyond someone's power to make a decision. What's that? In terms of this. But the other aspect of this is the fact that there are male and there are female. Okay? And if I identified tomorrow as a 6'7" Chinese female WNBA player, okay, at some point in time, someone would have to look at me and say, we need to talk, all right? This does not mean that we should not be caring and have people that are grappling and struggling with these issues. But data also supports something else along this line too, and that is there are aspects to being male and there are aspects to being female. The sociologist Brad Wilcox, the University of Virginia, a book called Soft Patriarchs, New Men, How Christianity Shapes Fathers and Husbands. He did this in response to some work that's been going on lately. Journalists such as Stephen Cokie Roberts, Christian feminists such as James and Phyllis Alsdorf have argued the patriarchy is the problem. Patriarchal religion leads to domestic violence, they've argued. And made arguments such as this. Patriarchal religion fosters more corporal punishment. Patriarchal religion causes more domestic violence and spousal abuse. They believe that patriarchal religious belief makes men less likely to help with household labor. And they criticized evangelical programs such as Promise Keepers for fostering a traditional patriarchal pattern of family life. And you may have heard similar things in media and the like, and in the arguments that we see in our society today. If there's a problem with something, the first thing to blame is the patriarchy. But he went into this more detail and started breaking things down, and that's a key thing. You've got to be careful when data is reported. So, for example, for years, data was separated out. You are married, traditional marriage, or you're cohabitating. And now, as definitions get changed all the time, data gets aggregated that people can be cohabitating, and that can be classified as a traditional family. Okay, you've got to break data out and keep this. And here's what they found. It is true, he found, that evangelical fathers take a stricter approach to discipline than most other fathers. Yep, that's true. They spank their children more often than fathers do. But their disciplinary approach is balanced by their involved and affectionate approach to fathering. That's a key aspect there. Are there individuals out there who the only knowledge they have of parenting is spank, and if that doesn't work, spank harder? Yes. And is that abuse? It definitely can be. Okay. But then again, you have me, who the first time I was allowed to sit up front at church with the other youth. And I was so excited. And I was having a good old time until halfway through the sermon, when the kid next to me jabbed me and pointed, and standing at the end of the row was my father. Now, this is a traditional church, rectangular place. And we were the third row back. So he is standing in front of the minister, in front of the entire congregation. And my father just looks at me and goes, and I walked out, and we walked down the middle of the aisle. Everybody was looking at me. I was so embarrassed, traumatized. Oh, the psychological harm it did to me. I've been grappling with it ever since. the trauma. We walked out into the atrium, and my father looked at me and smiled and said, "I'm not going to spank you now." I can now fill in the rest of that sentence. There's witnesses. Okay. No, he said, but you're going to go back down there, and you're going to sit down, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. Are we clear? And I'm like, I really don't want to go back, because I had to walk down the entire front, everything with everybody else. And he's like, oh, no, that's where you're going. Okay. So we headed home. Mom and Dad are chatting. Wasn't that a great lesson today? This is great. I'm going, hey, he forgot. Woo-hoo! And we get home, and I'm heading off to my room, and I'm like, dodge that bullet. And I hear this, son, come here. And I hear as that belt goes out, and I'm like, he didn't forget. Do you know what happened the next Sunday? I sat 3 rows up from the front, and I kept my mouth shut. It was amazing. Okay. Now, my sister, I'll have to check with her, but I believe she was only spanked once in her life. Okay. Because Dad could look at her angry, she'd burst into tears and never do it again. That was not me. Okay. But the fact is, yes, evangelical fathers tend to be more disciplinary, but they also balance that with caring and compassionate. They spend more time with their children and their spouses. They were also more affectionate with their kids and their spouses. And this is the key thing when you break the data out. They had the lowest rates of domestic violence of any group in America. If you are a woman, the safest place you can be is married to a man who comes to church often. That is what the data shows. Okay, period. Okay. Wives report that these men are more appreciative, and the wives are happier than the average wife or the wives of religiously unaffiliated men. And it is true. Evangelical men do slightly less chores around the house. Gentlemen, I hate to break it to you, but your wife is going to bring this up to you this afternoon when you get back from church. So you might as well just get prepped to get some more stuff done, okay? That is true. But they also found that the evangelical man is more likely to thank their wife for the work she does than non-evangelical. Now, it's not all good news. The worst fathers and husbands are people who call themselves Christians but hardly go to church. This is what the data shows. These men have high divorce rates, and they have the highest rate of domestic violence of any group in the United States. So it is either or, ladies and gentlemen. Or as Christ stated in Revelation, I would that you would be hot or cold. Saying I'm a Christian and I go to church every now and then means that ain't good. That's what the data shows. American Heart Association, 2002, they studied 4,000 men and women over 10 years, and they found the following. Men and women who defy traditional societal roles suffer more health consequences, such as heart disease, than those who adhere to traditional roles. They took into account every factor they could think of: smoking, age, anxiety, stress, household responsibilities, blood pressure, weight, cholesterol levels, diabetes, everything else. All things being equal, they found the following. The investigators did not find that high amounts of job stress, characterized as having high demands with little autonomy, was associated with an increased risk of heart disease. In other words, high job stress, which people complain about, that wasn't the issue. However, they did find that women who were in positions of high authority with high job demands suffered higher rates of heart disease than other women, although their male counterparts did not. It's just what the data shows. Similarly, men who dubbed themselves primarily as house husbands, about 10% of the participants, had an 82% higher 10-year death rate. Now, I want to be very clear about this. We're talking about general masculine and feminine traits. Are there individuals that fall outside those bounds? Absolutely. Okay. One of the people I admire greatly is Margaret Thatcher. Okay. And I love the story that is told that when the Falklands was taken over by the Argentinians, she had brought in her cabinet, all her advisors. They're all men, and they're debating what to do. Okay? And the men are saying, we can't take the islands back. Our military's this, that, and the other thing. And she listens to all this, and she turns around, and she says, I don't think you understand. Those are British citizens. We are going to war, and we are going to get the islands back. And at that time, the steward came in, because it's lunch, and stated, what would Prime Minister, what would you like to have for lunch? And she said, I'll have the steak. And the steward said, and the vegetables? And she looks around to all her male advisors, and she goes, the vegetables will all have steak as well. And that's how she got the name Iron Lady. Okay? So there are definitely individuals, women who can perform just as high a level set. There are men that can be house husbands. Do this, that's right. But we're talking about aggregate in general. Because like this last number, when I was finishing my PhD, Gretchen was working full-time to take care of us. And I'm finishing my PhD, and we had both our children as I'm trying to finish my thesis. So I had a 10-month-old, or let me take that back. I had a 15-month-old and a 2-month-old, okay? And Liesl had extreme colic. She screamed night and day, okay? And the only thing that would calm her down was breastfeeding, an option unavailable to me. That 82% higher death rate, I think that's low. And I ain't joking, okay? Because I was sitting here going out of my freaking mind, okay? And I wanted to medicate this child. And Gretchen's not here, so I can really tell this story. And she was like, we don't medicate children with colic anymore. That's not what's best for the child. I'm like, forget what's best for the child. I need this kid medicated. And I started digging in some research, and then I found out that pediatricians quit medicating children for colic when they quit doing house calls. Because, it's easy to tell parents who haven't slept in months, well, you just need to hack it. This is what's best for the child. When they're in your office, when you're at their house, and they're going. So it was a Sunday, and I had it, okay? Because I had gone to the dentist, and I hadn't been to the dentist in years going through all this stuff. And they're like, oh, your teeth are in bad shape, and you're just going through, and we're going to have to use water drill and everything. And I was like, wake me when it's over. And they're like, no, you don't understand, sir. This is going to be extremely painful. And I just looked at them and said, are you going to tilt me over horizontally? And they're like, yes. I said, wake me when it's over. And they woke me up. I had blood streaming down my leg. And they said, we have never seen anybody sleep through this. And I said, I haven't slept. And I don't know how long. Okay? So I went back and I told Gretchen, I said, on Monday, you will come back in this house with paregoric. Okay? If you do not, I will do this scientifically. I will take an eyedropper, and I will fill it with wine, and I will put 2 drops into Liesl's mouth, and I will wait 15 minutes, and I will put 2 drops more until this child goes to sleep. But one way or the other, I'm sleeping come Monday. And it's like Liesl heard and understood. She's like, I've pushed my father too much. And that should have been my warning sign right then, because that's never changed, because she's just like her dad. But it was like on Monday, she's like, okay, I'm going to sleep. I've got this. But the catch is this, and I make a joke about this, but it's real. This data shows that. There are traditional male and female aspects of it. And I'm not telling you how to live your life. Again, individuals are just that, individuals. But there are things that do affect our health because we were created differently. Okay? He or she who finds a wife or husband finds a good thing. Proverbs 18. Men, forget the midlife crisis. Do whatever it takes to work on your marriage. Divorce is only slightly less dangerous than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And divorce is much worse on the man than it is the woman. Okay? Divorced men are twice as likely to die from heart disease, stroke, hypertension, cancer as married men in a given year. And in fact, when I'm going through data with my undergraduates, and they love this discussion, I said, guys, you want to live longer? They're like, yeah. I said, what's the number one thing you can do to live longer? They're like, oh, exercise, eat right, blah, 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 all this stuff. I'm like, nope. And You're like, what? I said, the number one thing a man does to live longer is get married. That's it, statistically, is it. Because our wives make us, quit drinking, quit smoking, eat right, exercise, go to the doctor, da-da-da, all those things. But it's true. Okay? Getting married is the number one thing a man will do to increase his lifespan. There's a lot of men looking at me going, and a lot of wives looking over at their husbands just sort of smiling, going, huh? See? It is true. Now, one aspect of that, and gentlemen, I will just state that, is that our wives make us go to the doctor, because men don't. I'm married to one, and I don't like going to the doctor, even though he's my neighbor and hunting partner. Okay? But going to the doctor is a good thing. Matthew 5, 27, 28, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. In 1999, we passed a threshold in this country. The majority of couples now live together before marriage, but for every 100 couples living together, 40 will break up before marriage. Of the 60 who are married, at least 45 will divorce, and this leaves only 15 intact marriages for the original 100 couples. In a study by Leslie Margolin at the University of Iowa, cohabitating boyfriends were 27 times more likely than natural parents to abuse a child. Now notice what the data showed previously. For women, the most dangerous place you can be is with a man who claims to be a Christian but doesn't go to church. Boyfriends, unmarried boyfriends, that's the most dangerous thing for the kids. It was those with the least sexual experience or sexual partners who were more likely to report their marriage as always warm and supportive. Sort of goes against our sex-saturated society today. But Hebrews 13:4 says marriage should be honored by all. The marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. Kevin Lehman, sex begins in church. When's the last time you heard that sermon heading? Okay? Sex begins in church. What the data shows is this. Married people who are traditionalists, i.e. you haven't had a lot of sex partners or you remain to marriage, have sex, they have the highest levels of satisfaction in marriage. Next up, married married non-traditionalists. Okay? May not be going to church. You may have sex before with multiple partners, but you're married. Okay? Then, unmarried traditionalists. And bottom of the barrel, unmarried non-traditionalists. Well, wait a second. What? In fact, there's also data in there that didn't give this, but the data also shows married traditionalists, women were more orgasmic than the others. But see, you're not going to hear that on any of these shows out there because all they're talking about is, OnlyFans accounts and all this stuff, okay? Because we live in a sex-saturated society. But that doesn't mean it actually works the way the world says it does. Galatians 6, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from that Spirit will reap eternal life. 1993, this initial study was done. It's been replicated since that time. And what we do is we compare the United States and other states to Utah. Now, why is that? Because the majority of people in Utah are Mormon, and the majority of people in Utah go to church much more often than the rest of the population of the United States. Okay? And so it's an efficient way for us to compare and contrast. What we found is this: violent crime, murder, robbery, aggravated assault. You see a difference? Not to say that Utah doesn't have crime or things of this sort, but it's a heck of a lot safer place to live than Washington, D.C. Okay. Percentage rates of single parenthood. I want you to notice something here. Very religious. Look at those low rates. Everything beyond that, basically the same. They triple. And there's really not a big difference between whether you're somewhat religious, not at all religious, or no religious affiliation. In other words, it gets back to what Jesus was saying. Choose. Be hot, be cold. Don't be in between. Okay? Now, before we get into this, I mean to bring this up a little bit earlier when we were talking about going to church and the like. The Surgeon General of the United States just released a report saying loneliness is now a worldwide health concern. I want to give you some data for that. Just saw this morning because I was just curious. What's the latest data? And I was shocked because I didn't realize it had come to this. In 2020, the average person in America spent about 60 minutes a day interacting with friends and people they knew in person. Okay? In person. Okay? As of 2020, Americans spend about 2 minutes a day interacting with people face to face, their friends face to face. Catch that? And I know things, we work online, we do these things. I'm not saying these aren't nice tools. We are broadcasting this class. And especially for people who are shut-ins, people who couldn't make it to church today, etc., it's a great tool. But the simple reality is this: it cannot substitute for face-to-face interactions with fellow Christians. Growing up, I used to sleep in front of the fireplace because it was the only source of heat we had in the house. Love fires. Just loved watching the glow of it. My grandfather used to pull a stunt. He'd take the tongs and he'd reach in and he'd pull out a coal from the middle of the fire, bright red. And he'd just set it aside. And we'd go on talking and everything else that. And after a while, he'd point it out and he'd reach over and he'd grab the coal and he'd just toss it to me. I'm like, what? But it was cool. Because he'd taken her out from all the other coals. And it was cool. And he'd take it from my hand and he'd toss it back in the middle of the fire. And after a while, it was glowing red hot again. And he made the point, he says, that's part of why you go to church, boy. If you're not around other people who can challenge you, who can build you up, it's easy to get cold, just like that coal. But there's an easy way to get re-energized and push back, and that's to get back with those people again. We come to church for a large part for that, to build each other up. My father, in the last years of his life, was at a retirement home, shut in, but still a gentleman came from church to bring him communion, and even though he would watch it online, they would sit there and discuss themselves face to face, debating the Bible, going through. That's the key thing that's here. Interacting with people to build each other up, to encourage us on the way and go on. But this is going to become a bigger issue in our country. But it is also something else for you. It was just pointed out. It's going through. We talk about evangelizing. We talk about reaching out for people for Christ. There's lots of different ways we can do that. But I just point this out that with this data, it just means that you and I, in this country, in this society, have the easiest way to evangelize than anybody's ever had in history. And how? Just be friendly. Just talk to people. Because to be perfectly blunt, that's apparently becoming a lost art in this country. And just talking to people and being friendly will do more for a lot of people than you can possibly imagine. And bring in an opportunity for you to serve them as God calls us to serve, but also to bring them to Christ as well. Most of us know now that Rousseau was wrong, that man, when you knock off the chains off of religion, sets up the death camps that we saw in World War II. Soon we shall know everything the 18th century didn't know and nothing it did, and it will be hard to live with us in this society. That was in 1962. What ails modern civilization? Fundamentally, our society's affliction is the decay of religious belief. If a culture is to survive and flourish, it must not be severed from the religious vision out of which it arose. As I was leaving D.C., I said, one of the sociologists I work with, I asked him, I said, forget about debate religious belief and what we may or may not agree on different things. Said that all religions have at its core the fact that wealth isn't going to make you happy, that you've got to get outside of yourself. And I said, I wonder, as this becomes less religious society, if we're going to see, continue to see increased levels of depression, anxiety, etc. He says, we ought to do a study on that. He says, we've already done the studies. And that's exactly what it is. And so, it ends with this. There's practical aspects of this. Imagine, ladies, you're walking down a sidewalk late at night, and you see 3 strapping young men heading towards you. Okay? Now, in our society, we're not to judge, right? We're not to go through all this. But the bottom line, even if you're a card-carrying member of Atheists Anonymous, if you know these 3 gentlemen had just come from a Bible study, it may be 2 o'clock in the morning, but you're probably going to breathe a sigh of relief, because while it's not absolutely guaranteed they're not going to rape you, odds are they're not. Religion has practical value. But the research shows that for the most part, those people who were very religious were the ones who benefited. Those who were somewhat religious did not differ greatly from the general populace. And so what I leave you with today are Jesus' words. Choose. Be hot or cold. Choose. And remember, Jesus did not do any of the marketing approaches that we do in this country. He was going on, he called to people, follow me. Well, let me bury my father. Let the dead bury the dead. Follow me. Well, forget about that. Follow me. Everything he did forced people to make a decision. Choose. All in or not. Okay? That's the catch. All in or not. Okay. So I leave you with this last thing, because was that the first or second bell? Oh. Okay. Then I probably don't leave you with this next thing. You have a good week, and we'll see you later.